Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models, episode 20. I'm Steve Kwan.
Coming to you live.
Well, not really live. This will probably be launched in about a week or two, but still.
I thought I'd try something out.
Yeah. I mean, this is basically a radio show, right? We're going to be internet famous. So today we're going to be talking about longevity. This is probably the topic that we get the most questions about. People are always emailing us, contacting us, and asking, how do I stay in it for the long game? And this can mean from a physical standpoint, how do I make sure that I can maintain my health, prevent injuries over the long game? But I think a large part of this also is the mental aspect of jiu-jitsu. It is a really long journey to train for your lifetime or to train for decades. And it's easy to burn out or to have events come up that can force you to reconsider your priorities. You see a lot of people who quit jiu-jitsu. When you start jiu-jitsu, a lot of the people who come up with you at white belt, they're going to be disappearing left and right. When you and your friends get their blue belts, that's another period where people kind of just disappear. For a lot of people, getting a blue belt is a significant enough accomplishment that they just pack it up and call it a day once they get it. And going beyond that, though, you don't see, or at least I don't see, a lot of purple, brown, or black belts who quit. At that point, you've kind of made the decision to stay around. The way that someone once explained it to me was that when you start jiu-jitsu, when you're at white belt, what you're trying to decide is this something I like to do? And when you're at blue belt, what you're trying to decide is this something that I want to do for the rest of my life? And once you made that decision, if you stick through blue belt, you're probably going to be around for quite a while.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And, we've been in this sport for, over a decade now. And it's funny how, at least for me, my mindset totally changed as I have gone through the ranks. At first I really wanted to basically just get a workout in and learn some self-defense. Then around the time that I was leaving white belt, I felt like, okay, I'm really enjoying this. I want to do some more competitions and be serious about it. And then now that I'm a black belt and I'm starting to accumulate injuries, my mindset is basically, okay, I just need to survive, basically. Like every class that I get out not injured is a blessing, know? And people have different goals in jiu-jitsu. Some people don't care about injuries. They just want to win world titles. That's all they care about. Other people like me, for example, I'm in it for the long game. So even if I never win a world title, I just want to be able to train until I'm an old man. And, I've made jiu-jitsu my career. So I have to be around and be able to move on the mats for my students and for my own well-being. So definitely knowing where you want to go with the sport will definitely help you decide how to stay healthier longer.
It's funny you mentioned how your goal now is just to survive. When you're at a white belt level, your goal is to survive. When you're at a black belt level, your goal is also to survive, but in a very different way. Jiu-jitsu at a young level is interesting because when you start off with white belt, everything is so exciting. Everything is new. You're meeting new people. There are no expectations around how good you should or shouldn't be. It's a fun opportunity to learn, and everything is new and novel. It's kind of like being a baby in a lot of ways. Yeah. But as you get further, once you get to blue belt and you kind of realize that the journey is maybe a lot longer than, you initially thought. Like when you're a white belt, everything beyond blue belt just seems totally impossible and unattainable. Like just getting to blue belt seems like a Herculean accomplishment. But once you get there, you kind of realize, there are decades worth of things that you're going to have to do to kind of keep down the path. You realize how far away that black belt is. And I think for a lot of people, that's when they bail. That's when they think, you know what, this was good enough. I did my thing. I tried jiu-jitsu. I can tell people I'm a blue belt and I'm just never going to come back again.
Yeah. And you're so right about, I like to think of the analogy of not a baby, but like a freshman going into high school. You're basically a fish in a big pond and there's lots of predators around and you're just trying to survive. You're just trying to not look like an idiot. You're trying to, not disturb the higher ranks and just try and learn as much as you can and not, and you're just trying to survive. And I found, I was really trying to, when I was a white belt and blue belt for sure, I would go so hard. I would try to, I'd roll hard. I'd try and never let anyone, get positions on me. And as your game sort of refines itself over time and you develop more skills and knowledge, your game starts to slow down a little bit because, like for me, I always tell my guys to try to roll light. You know, there's a time and place to roll hard. We're preparing for a competition, fine, roll hard. But generally scaling back the intensity in the room is my goal. And I know as a coach that doesn't sound like it's, you know, you're not preparing world champions or whatever, but at the same time, I got customers and they all have jobs and a lot of them don't want to become world champions. So it's important that they try and get as much mat time as they can over a period of time, and that involves not getting injured. And that's how I look at it too for myself. There's a time and place when I'm going to go hard, and a time, most of the time, I'm generally going to roll pretty light.
Yeah, and even if you do want to be a world champion, if you are constantly encountering physical and mental hurdles because of your training style, whether it be injuries or just being too hard on yourself or just being intense when you should be focused on learning, if you're setting up these obstacles, it doesn't matter how good you are or what your goals are, you've got to be able to win the war, not just the battle. If you are training in such a way that you're not going to be able to stick around for a long time, you're probably going to have trouble getting to that elite level, right? I mean, it's hard to get to black belt and become a black belt world champion if your motivation or your physical health don't allow you to hang around for that long,
unless you're taking something, which a lot of them are, right?
Yeah.
So it does make a difference when we're talking about longevity because you know, should I do PEDs, performance enhancing drugs? Should I not? You know, there's the whole moral, ethical side to it. But then on the other hand, well, what if it allows me to reach a higher level? What if it allows me to ignore injuries and keep training through injuries? So every top level athlete, myself included, has, you know, had to consider that route and realize that the best guys are doing that, especially in jiu-jitsu where there's very little regulation. So that is always something that higher level competitors are going to have to battle with in their own mind. You know, there's short-term really amazing benefits to things like that. But in the long term, if you know, as you get older, if you've had, you know, a few decades of doing steroids or whatever, it's definitely going to have a negative effect on your body. Plus, if you ever stop using them, you're really going to fall hard, which is honestly the reason why I don't do it, is because I know that one day I'm not going to be able to take them anymore. And when that happens, I'm going to feel like even worse on the mats from all that testosterone.
Yeah, the strongest arguments against performance-enhancing drugs are tied to longevity. And in this case, longevity might not even mean when you're 60. You know, it could mean when you're a lot younger. I mean, if you want to see some examples of why not to do performance-enhancing drugs, take a look at what happens in professional wrestling, where you've got people dropping dead before they're 30, right? I mean, it is really the kind of thing where you might achieve some degree of short-term benefit, but does that really matter if you only have a few more years left on the clock? It's like one of those perfect examples of where you want to prioritize winning the war over prioritize winning the battle. And I think a lot of what we talk about today will probably center around how do you win that long-term war and how do you keep yourself in the game long enough?
Yeah, and it's easy for, if you're at a really competitive gym and people are using steroids, it's really easy to get caught up in that lifestyle and justify it in your own mind saying, well, why wouldn't I do it? All my teammates do it. My coaches do it. I'm going against people who do it. I just want to level the playing field. And it's really easy to just get caught up in that culture. Like I said, my goals in jiu-jitsu have always been more towards, I love competing. I love it, but my goals are always aimed more towards teaching and having a school and of course my family. So I want to be around later on, you know, when my kids are having kids and I'm an old man, I still want to be able to step on the mats and train and teach and all that. But definitely don't want to cut any time short, and I don't want to possibly damage years in the future because I stopped taking something that, you know, gave me kind of a false positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of an artificial advantage. It's not really a statement about what you're capable of. It's more of a statement of what the drug is capable of.
It's true. And the benefits of steroids are they're very real. They're undeniable. You know, your response times become quicker mentally. You can make decisions on the fly a lot quicker. You're just, you know, you're not going to feel certain injuries as much. You're going to heal way faster. You know, I don't get me wrong. I would love to do that. But at the same time, I think about the negative effects that it has long term. And it just, for me, it's enough to not not put my body in that kind of a situation.
Yeah, my recommendation to anyone who is even remotely considering something like that is, again, just take a look at what has happened to a lot of, older pro wrestlers or older MMA fighters, and consider whether you want to wind up like them. The thing about competitive athletics is people are only in the limelight when they're in the competition. You pay attention to what these guys are doing when they're 20 years old and they look like superheroes. But you don't see what happens when they get into their 30s and they can't hack it anymore. And then they get into their 40s and they can barely get out of bed. And then they get into their early 50s and they're dying of heart attacks and stuff. You don't see this stuff because a lot of the time these people fall out of the limelight because they're not able to compete anymore. Understanding that there are serious long-term consequences to that kind of thing is what probably should really discourage you from going down that road.
Yeah, and you'll see athletes that are, like you said, 20, that are just hitting their prime. Nowadays, jiu-jitsu athletes, the level's so high that, there's 20-year-old black belts that are just, they're world class, right? Back when I first started, that was kind of a rare thing. I it was more the older guys that had accumulated a lot of experience that were dominating, and even they were the legends, 10, 20 years ago. But now it's kids that are, as young as 17, 18. The level's ridiculously high. So these guys, their goal is to just win medals. Their goal is legacy.
Yeah.
And that's different because, then it's going to be easier for you to justify in your mind to do steroids because you got to strike while the iron's hot. You only got a small window to make a big difference. Whereas I'm thinking about, God, I hope I can compete in the masters divisions when I'm 50, for fun. And if if you go into jiu-jitsu with such a serious mindset that it has negative effects on your body and your mind with the decisions that you make moving forward, you might want to reconsider what your goals really are.
Everyone should have some clarity as to what they want to get out of jiu-jitsu. I think that's an important thing that everyone needs to think about, is to really be honest with yourself, not about what your gym wants you to do, or about what the jiu-jitsu community wants you to do, or about what everyone else is doing, but what do you really want to get into or get out of jiu-jitsu? Most people have something in mind when they start jiu-jitsu, and very few people get into jiu-jitsu thinking, I'm going into jiu-jitsu because I want to be a gold medalist or a world champion. Most people get in because they want to learn to defend themselves, or because they want to come up, have a fun way to get exercise. And once they get exposed to the competitive scene, those priorities might change. But it's important to always be honest with yourself about exactly what your long-term priorities are. And, if one of your priorities is to have a competitive legacy, the thing that you have to bear in mind is, leaving a legacy doesn't mean a lot if you're not around to actually see the legacy happen after the fact, right? If you achieve something incredible at 25 and then you're dead by 35, is that really a win, right? So it's something that you have to consider. And that's why longevity is so important. So if I were to break down what longevity means in the context of jiu-jitsu, I think there's kind of two areas here. One is the physical side of longevity, and the other is the mental side of longevity, right? And both of these are quite different, and I think most people probably hit setbacks in both areas over their jiu-jitsu journey. For me, when it comes to the physical side of jiu-jitsu, a good part of this, of course, is just staying in shape, staying healthy. But I think a lot of it, too, is how you respond to and deal with injuries, how you allow yourself to recover over time, and how you avoid the kinds of things that are going to result in like a devastating injury. I mean, we talked about this a bit in the last episode, but when it comes to longevity, your approach to injuries is extremely important, because a significant injury is likely to occur to most people at some point, and how you respond to that is going to dictate how far along the road you can continue to go, right? It's an injury is usually not a deal breaker when it comes to training, but it might require you to make some strategic changes to how you train or what kind of game you play.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you see young guys in the gym that just go so hard, and injuries are the farthest thing from their mind. Mm-hmm. You add a decade to their career, and then all of a sudden injuries are going to be pretty much at the front of their mind a lot of the time, or, at least something that they consider. So like you said, you're going to have to adjust your game if you do go through significant injury, or adjust the way that you train. And that's just part of it. I mean, all athletes go through injuries. When I recently had my knee injury, I was looking, asking people that have had the same type of injury, looking online, seeing what can I do moving forward, because the injury has happened. So mentally, if I just sulk and say, I'm not going to be able to be the same person I was, I'm not going to have the same game I was, I can't do this position now, I can't do that. If you start thinking like that, then the negativity really will start to, you'll believe that you can't do things. And it's really important that your mindset stays positive throughout injuries, especially if it's a really bad injury like torn ligaments and things where the recovery time is going to be, is going to be a long layoff. And usually necks, backs, knees, and shoulders are kind of the worst ones I think you can get in jiu-jitsu. It's important to realize that even though there's going to be downtime where maybe you can't spar and you can't do the same physical things, that if you work hard and you keep, you do your physio, you're disciplined, and you keep watching and coming to the gym and studying, that window it's just a period of time, and then you will get back to the mats. It's a matter of getting through those hurdles that are, really what jiu-jitsu is struggle, right? Mm-hmm. So I just look at injuries, especially when I'm going through them, that this is just part of the journey. And, if you look at it as a negative thing, you're going to be drowning in negativity. If you look at it as a hurdle that you need to overcome and you can still grow during that time, then you will grow from that time. So it's really how you look at it. That's going to influence moving forward how that affects your game. One thing that like Danher was saying was, and referencing Gordon Ryan, that if you don't come to the gym at all and you don't, you're injured, so you're just going to stay home and not think about jiu-jitsu, then you are going to just get left behind. Mm-hmm. But if you keep coming to the gym and even just watching, you can exercise your brain mentally by watching people roll. And, he says quite often people will return just as good, if not even more better from long layoffs.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I found that from personal experience, when I've had to take layoffs, I usually am better when I come back, despite the fact that I haven't been training. And a large part of that is because it kind of gives you the opportunity to reset mentally and to come back almost like a new person, but with the benefit of years of experience, right? You can kind of come back with a white belt mindset, rebuild your whole game from the ground up, but you still do have that experience that gives you a competitive edge over people who haven't been training as long as you have. We've talked about these things in prior episodes, but what you just kind of went over, Matt, part of it is having a growth mindset, which is understanding that any obstacle is an opportunity for improvement. And just because you've lost some physical capacity doesn't mean that you can't improve in other ways or pivot your game. And even if you don't experience a massive injury, you're probably going to find that over time, your game is going to evolve in this fashion anyway, because as you get older, as your technique improves and, as you become less dependent on athleticism, you're going to develop a game that slows down and is more based on, technique and control and positional dominance. My instructor, has said in the past that, as you get older, your game tends to evolve more into a pressure passing, pressure control based approach rather than being more of like a scrambly type game, in a large part simply because that kind of game works better for older people, right? As you may lose your athleticism and your speed, but you often retain your strength. So having like a pressure-based game is usually ideal once you start getting into your 40s and 50s. And additionally, once your technique becomes sharp enough, it becomes a lot easier to control people and shut down athleticism. So if you buy into the philosophy of jiu-jitsu that it should not really require a tremendous amount of athleticism to win a fight, then having a growth mindset allows you to understand that an injury is not the end of the world. It's an opportunity to pivot and to improve. And you also mentioned a bit about consistency there. And I agree with that 100%. It's fine to be off the mat for whatever reason, as long as you still have some headspace for jiu-jitsu in your brain, right? As long as you're still thinking about it, looking into new things, researching new things, mentally drilling. That kind of stuff allows you to keep jiu-jitsu at the forefront of your brain. Whereas if you just kind of move on with your life and you're not even thinking about it, it gets real hard to get back into jiu-jitsu after the fact.
Yeah, as a coach, one of the ways that I've actually benefited from this injury, well, two things. First thing is as a coach, I can watch my students roll now, where normally when rounds are going, I'm rolling as well, right? So I can't be paying attention to everyone while I'm rolling. I'm focused on my own roll and my own partner. When you get to overview a room for weeks or whatever, months at a time, during sparring sessions, you get to watch people's games. And as a coach, I feel like I understand where the holes and the strengths are in my students' games. So I can give them immediate feedback. You know, we talked about the feedback loop, giving it right away, and how the quick feedback is more beneficial than, let's say, after class or next week or whatever, when it's not fresh in your mind. So I can give that immediate feedback to my students. I can see where there's gaps, where people, you know, maybe they need a few concepts here, or they're missing, you know, this would really work good for you there. I feel like the injury has actually made me a better coach, and I think my students have benefited from that. But also, due to this injury, I've sort of realized, like, hey, I need to do essentially what they call prehab. Like, I need to do pre-injury stuff so that it reduces the chance of me getting injured. So, you know, I got to keep doing physio. I got to keep doing strength training, which is stuff that I wasn't doing before because I never had to worry about an injury. So now it's super important for me as part of my regular training schedule to just keep doing that and stay disciplined. And you know, the injury has, you know, it'll make you hungry to get back, and it'll also keep you disciplined and keep you more focused. That's how I feel, because I watch these guys roll, and obviously I want to get in there, but I know that I have to put in the time and let my body heal and respect that it takes time for me to come back. And then I know that I will get back as long as I stay disciplined.
Yeah, it's always tempting to jump back in as soon as you can, but understanding stress and recovery and when your body needs that recovery time is one of the best ways to prevent serious damage. You know, a lot of injuries happen not out of the blue, but because there was wear and tear building up and you just weren't taking off the time that you needed to recover. And as a result, one day the rubber band just snapped, right? That's often how these things happen. The good news is, you know, growth occurs from stress and recovery. When you put stress on your body or even on your mind, and then you give it time to recover, it comes back stronger, right? That's why we always say that avoiding discomfort is a losing strategy. You want to find discomfort and use that as a growth opportunity. As they say, when you break a bone, it heals back stronger. Similarly, when you're building muscle or putting on muscle, you know, really what you're doing is you're breaking down and destroying your muscle, and that encourages your body to heal it back up stronger than it was before. And when it comes to identifying when your body needs rest, that is such a crucial thing to engaging for the long term. Trying to power through injuries when you don't have to is that's a good way to get yourself put on the shelf for longer than you probably should be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other things that we probably should bring up, you mentioned the feedback loop, which is, of course, super important when it comes to providing quality coaching to the people on your team. Kind of related to that, when we're talking about how you stay in the game for a very long period of time, whether it be jiu-jitsu or just life, a winning strategy there is to focus on prioritizing the creation of good habits over goal chasing and dream chasing. If you set yourself a long-term goal of like, hey, I want to be a black belt world champion, and that's all you're thinking about, and that's the only thing on your mind, you're probably not ever going to get there. What is more beneficial is you want to set that goal, but then you want to focus, rather than on dreaming, on building day-to-day good habits, right? You know, you kind of get there by taking single steps at a time. These things don't happen overnight. So if you want to come up with a way to keep yourself engaged for possibly, you know, years or possibly decades in jiu-jitsu, I find it super helpful, rather than thinking about the long-term goal of, hey, I want that black belt, to focus on smaller micro goals about what I can do today. You know, how can I establish good habits in the gym? How can I make sure that I'm giving it my all every day? I'm avoiding stupid situations. I'm focusing on fundamentals and on proper alignment. And how do I build that up? Because focusing just on a long-term goal can be extremely demotivating because you might get there one day, right? If something is going to take you 10,000 days, you're going to have one great day, but then the other 9,999 are going to be days where you're not achieving your goal, and that could be highly demoralizing. So it's better to focus on the creation of good habits, focus on winning those day-to-day battles, and make sure that those habits you're building are the ones that you need to get you to that goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, if your dream is to just be a world champion or a champion at the highest level, the worst thing an athlete wants is to have to live with regret, right? So if you regret the fact that you never got that world championship, or you never got to that level you wanted to get to, if you put in the work every day and create those habits that you talk about, Steve, then you're not going to regret anything if you put everything into it. It's when you set that goal, that high goal that only very few people reach, only very few people can have that skill level and those gifts that allow them to get there. That's going to lead to regret if you can never reach that goal. But every day, if you know that you're doing all you can to get to a certain level, then you, as an athlete, you're not going to live with regret, right? And I think that regret's one of the worst things that we can have mentally as humans.
Yeah, it's great to set a really, really audacious goal, but at the same time, you can't tie your entire personal value and worth to that goal. It's something that you want to fight towards and try to achieve, but you don't want to create a situation where your life is over if you fail to achieve that. Because the reality is, even if you do your best, your absolute best, and you do everything right, there are a variety of reasons why you might never achieve that goal for no fault of your own, right? Even if you are on paper the best jiu-jitsu athlete in the world, there could be a variety of reasons, including injuries or just flukes or bad judging. There could be a variety of reasons why you never get that goal. And what you don't want is to have your life peak at 25, fail to achieve this goal that you tied your entire sense of self-worth to, and then live the rest of your life in regret, right? That's the last thing you want. Whereas if you instead focus on building good habits that will, you may eventually get to that goal, but the big thing is, if you have good habits, every day is a win for you. Every day is something you can be proud of. It's also better for your day-to-day life satisfaction as well if you're focused on just winning daily battles and, going to the gym every day, training smart every day. That kind of, basically taking a gigantic goal and breaking it down into daily chunks is a great way to get there over the long term and to improve yourself and stay happy over the long term.
Yeah, I can remember the first time I did pans at purple belt. I won my first match, and then in the second match I went against a guy who had a really good spider guard. I must have been about 25 or 26 at this time, and I couldn't pass his spider guard. He swept me. He played the game so good. As soon as he swept me and came up on top, I managed to regard, and I stood up, and then immediately he pulled guard on me again, and it was just like he funneled me into his game. It was so perfect, and I'd traveled all the way down to LA, and I thought I was going to do better than this, but it was kind of disappointing. And then I was like, oh well, I'll take the loss. I've lost in competition before. And he moved on, and then about maybe half hour later, I'm in the change room, and there he is, just crying, just bawling to himself. And I'm like, hey man, how'd it go? Obviously I know he's lost at this point. He's not still in the bracket, and he's crying, and he's like, oh, the referee, I swore I did enough to win, but it just didn't go my way and all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like I literally didn't know what to say to him, because part of me, I understand how he feels losing in such a big competition. I think he had traveled from Philadelphia or something, but at the same time I was like, man, like, you're actually crying about this? Like, this means so much to you that if you don't win, you're sobbing as a grown man in the change room. And for me, that was kind of a moment where I realized, like, hey, like, don't take this shit so seriously. You know what I mean? Like, it's great to go out there and compete, but I compete to have fun. I compete because it's a challenge. If I lose, call me a loser or whatever, or not having a champion's mindset. If I lose, I'm not going to cry about it. I'm not in the change room depressed and beating myself up for it. I'm thinking about, okay, how could I, from an intellectual point of view, what did I do that led to my failure, and how can I now build those habits that will make changes in the future competitions, right? Like how you perform at the Pans a few years ago does not define you as a grappler. So, I've heard of other athletes like, Ronda Rousey. I read her book, and basically she's crying after every competition, and she's a crybaby is what I'm saying. And these people that want it so bad are on the verge of tears when they don't reach those goals. And she's like, if you want to be the best in the world, you have to cry if you don't win, because you want it that much. And it's, well, not really. It kind of means that you're not really emotionally in charge of yourself.
Yeah,
so.
you don't have agency over your own emotions, right? And hey, don't get me wrong. There's something to be said about people who are just a little bit crazy. A lot of the people who accomplish great, incredible things are a little bit insane, but not all of them. There's a lot of perfectly sane, rational people who are able to get there. The thing is, so man, you're probably familiar with the availability heuristic, which is a super scientific and confusing name for a pretty simple idea. Basically, what it says is like things that are people kind of more easily remember or prioritize things that are more exotic, or they have more mind space, right? Like a perfect example is when you think of, billionaire tech moguls. Everyone thinks of like, Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, because these guys are like crazy larger than life personalities. So that's what everyone thinks. And everyone thinks, oh, they must all be like that. But in reality, most people who get to like billionaire status, it's like old, boring dudes. They got there by being boring and consistent and in charge of their own emotions and just kind of doing the best they can on a daily basis and making smart decisions. But no one writes crazy articles or books about these guys because it's not really exciting from a newsworthy standpoint, right? No one wants to read a book about how completely normal, unusual guy strikes it big. It's always more interesting when you hear about these crazy lunatics who achieve something amazing, right? And Ronda Rousey's kind of a great example of that. I mean, yeah, she is one of those people who, once her mindset was broken, she was never able to come back. But there are a lot of other people who are a lot more chill, and they just kind of consistently dominated for a long, long, long time. Yeah. And they lost, and maybe they came back, right? I mean, I keep, as a Canadian, of course, I keep citing GSP.
That's exactly what just came into my mind.
But one of the things that was interesting about GSP is he was like that. He was one of those guys who had his mindset all tied up into his value. And after Matt Serra beat him, apparently he was just beside himself, and he had to go through a lot of psychological coaching. But man, after he came back, he seemed a hell of a lot more chill, right? And that's when he went on that incredible winning streak where he just, probably one of the greatest winning streaks of all time in MMA. So yes, for some people it may be helpful if your entire sense of self-worth is tied up in this win, but at the end of the day, you're probably more likely to harm yourself than to do any good for yourself. Even in the situation where if you do manage to win that goal, you're probably just setting yourself up for a fall at some point. And if all of your self-worth is tied into your tournament performance, that's not going to be good for yourself psychologically. And I don't believe that kind of intense, emotional mindset is required for success. Some people have it, but I don't think it's a requirement. And I think there's enough evidence out there that you can see that some people have, a lot of people have a very healthy mindset, and that is what helps them get to the highest levels.
Yeah. And for someone who's an elite athlete like Ronda Rousey was, in judo and whatnot, I mean, you're right about crazy, definitely giving some athletes the edge. Mm-hmm. And I think judo is a different sport from jiu-jitsu in that if you ever train judo, when you're sparring, it's like they're trying to hurt you. They're trying to put you through the ground and throw you hard. And whereas in jiu-jitsu, it's a lot more, I think the camaraderie and the playfulness in jiu-jitsu is a lot more evident. So, her sort of mindset is that to achieve my goal, which is Olympic gold medal, and eventually, be the world champion in MMA, I have to be crazy. I have to want it so bad that, I'm going to self-destruct if I don't get this. And yeah, she talks about how she's always crying in her book. And for me, I'm not an as elite athlete as someone who would be in the Olympics, let's say, but I feel like I was in control of myself enough to think that was kind of crazy when I heard about it, because I think it just comes down to goals, and what my goal is in jiu-jitsu is more longevity, more, I'm trying to make a living off of it and I want to share it. Instead of just, I need to win the highest level. I need to, whenever I go to the PANs or ADCC trials or whatever, I've never cried after losing a competition. Yeah. It just doesn't, it means a lot to me, but it just doesn't, it's not, there's so many more important things to life that I can think of than winning a competition. Yeah. And I think overall, I think it's a healthier mindset because it keeps me in the game longer and it keeps me wanting to keep doing these competitions. I don't hate competitions. I don't hate competing because I've lost competitions.
Yeah. I think that having passion is always an asset. You always want to be doing the things you're passionate about, but that's different from being so emotional that your emotions control you, right? Passion is something that you should be able to harness, but ultimately it's something that you should be able to control. If your emotions control you, you're a toddler, right? Let's call it what it is, right? You don't want to be in a situation where your emotions are making decisions for you. That's not a healthy way to live your life. And, from my perspective, really the most important thing, if you want to stay in jiu-jitsu for the long time, is it needs to always be fun. That should be one of the driving goals behind everything you do in jiu-jitsu. It's that keep it playful mentality. Regardless of how lofty your ambitions are in jiu-jitsu, if it's not fun, you're probably not going to stick with it long enough to have significant success. Stephen Kesting, in one of his newsletters a long time ago, had a great quote that I don't remember exactly, but he was providing advice on building the perfect workout and kind of defining your workout routine. And he said that, the perfect workout routine that you hate to do is way, way worse than the mediocre workout routine that you like to do. It's because you'll actually do that one, right? And it's better, it's better to have some things that you like to do, because then you're more inclined to do it. If you're forcing yourself to do things that you hate to do, that's usually not going to lead to good results.
Yeah, and jiu-jitsu is an amazing workout and super fun. Although there is going to be those people, we've all met them, that literally just don't find it fun and can't see themselves grappling another human being.
And that's fine, right? It's not for everybody.
Exactly. I totally get that. It is kind of a weird sport. Yeah. You know what I mean? But for those who love it, really love it. And some of the, what's that old saying that, if you're trying to convince your friend to come do jiu-jitsu, I'm going to get in shape first. I'm going to, let me go to the gym and get a little stronger. It's, you could be a marathon runner or an Olympic lifter or, a high level football player, and it'll never prepare you for the mental gymnastic exercise that is jiu-jitsu, right? So that's why you always just kind of tell those people, well, just come in and try it, because then you'll know if you like it or not. If you do like it, you're going to stick with it. That's why I stuck with it, is because I realized how much I actually enjoyed it. And the fact that it was an amazing workout actually kind of came secondary to the fact that I really was enjoying the learning aspect of jiu-jitsu. So absolutely, if you can find jiu-jitsu fun and enjoy training and look forward to training every day, then that's a good sign that you're on the right track. If you don't like training and you look at it as a chore and you don't want to go get your workout in, and you're just doing it for whatever reason, then, you're probably not going to have a long jiu-jitsu career.
Yeah, I went through a phase where I after I had my daughter, I took some time off jiu-jitsu, quite a bit of time actually. And honestly, I didn't miss it. And just after doing it for so many years, I was kind of burned out and I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And it took me a long time to kind of realize why I wasn't enjoying it. And eventually I kind of started to reframe in my mind what I actually wanted to get out of jiu-jitsu. And then I started getting excited about going again. And, now I train a lot more frequently than I did when I left, honestly. It's something, this is a discussion that you have to have with yourself. You have to kind of know what you want to get out of jiu-jitsu and make sure that you're structuring your training around things that are actually fun for you. If something isn't fun or enjoyable, or it's not going to lead you to the things that you want to do, don't do it, right? And that applies to jiu-jitsu. I have tremendous respect for anybody who is at least willing to try jiu-jitsu. It takes a lot of courage to go to a place where you're going to be assaulted by people who know how to fight when you don't, right?
Yeah.
I think we forget how crazy and intimidating that is for people who are training for the first time.
It is.
And I have tremendous respect for anyone who will at least give it a try, even if after a day they decide, you know what, this just isn't for me. At least they can say they tried. But if you don't, I would never wish someone stay with jiu-jitsu if it's not something that they actually enjoy doing. And if you ever find that, your enjoyment of jiu-jitsu fades, I would put some thought into why that is. Why has something changed, or what that means you are no longer enjoying it anymore. Like for me, when I kind of lost interest in jiu-jitsu, a lot of it was because I'd kind of fallen into habits and I kind of let my game solidify, and I was just doing the same thing over and over again. And as a result, I wasn't really developing. So I kind of lost interest in it. And the way that I actually kind of overcame that was I kind of looked at the things about my game that I was reliant upon, and I just stopped doing them. And so I started coming back to class and just getting smoked over and over again because I wasn't playing my A game. But after about a month or so, I was doing other new stuff and trying new things, and I was having a lot more fun than I had in years.
Yeah, so something that's amazing with jiu-jitsu is that like you really shouldn't be able to exhaust it. Like you're never truly a master. There's very few people that I would consider are like masters of jiu-jitsu, and by that I mean they know everything, right? Like there's so much that can be done, and the sport is evolving every year. We're seeing new techniques, new positions. If you really have that hunger for knowledge, you'll never stop learning, truly. The same sort of thing was in cooking when I was a chef. It was the same sort of thing as I began disliking it for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons was I was just doing the same thing every day, and I had lost that hunger to keep learning. I was happy to have met and exceeded the industry standard. In my opinion, I exceeded it. And then I wanted to do more, but the money wasn't right. Anyways, that's another story. But essentially I just stopped learning, and I realized that what really had me interested at the beginning was because I had a real hunger for learning. So I was able to switch careers. Now I'm in jiu-jitsu, and I still have that hunger for learning. Every day I go in, I learn something new, whether it's from a white belt or something I saw on the internet that I want to try, or from my professor. There's a quote Kai Otero said, and it's, when you feel like quitting, remember why you started. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really cool quote, because there are days when, even though we love jiu-jitsu, where we're like, oh man, like staying home would be pretty sweet right now. Or, maybe you got injured and you're thinking, oh, like this, you have doubts about yourself. Am I going to come back? Is this something I want to keep doing? And then you remember why you started. And the reason I started was because I loved the puzzle solving aspect of it and the knowledge aspect of it, as well as the physical side. And it kind of brings everything full circle for you, and you can sort of see why you do this, and that it is worth it to continue. And, something that I love. Yeah. When it comes to making sure that you win that battle where, you want to sit on the couch, but you actually get up and you go to train, that happens to everybody. Some days you just don't want to go in. And the problem is, if you succumb to that battle once, it's easier to then succumb to it again tomorrow, and before you know it, you're just not training anymore. It's a habit. Yeah. So the trick is you want to turn going to jiu-jitsu into a habit. And you do that by kind of separating the act of going to jiu-jitsu from whether you want to or not. And an example that I would give is, like, if you want to keep training over the long term, you need to make jiu-jitsu as much of a habit as like cleaning the bathroom or doing the laundry. It's, some days you just really don't want to do the laundry, but you do the laundry anyway because that's a habit and that's part of your routine. Some days you don't mind doing it, so you do it. It's not about whether you want to or not. It's just every day you do it, and you do it objectively, and you separate that from your emotional wants and needs, and you just make it a habit. And over time, by doing that, it actually
actually increases your enjoyment and desire to go and train because you've reinforced the habit. You have to understand that some days, you're going to be the hammer and some days you're going to be the nail.
Yeah.
But ultimately, every day you train is going to get you one step closer to where you want to be, regardless of whether you did well or didn't do well. It all comes back to competing mostly with yourself rather than trying to use other people as a measuring stick. You're the best measuring stick for your growth is who you were yesterday, right? Rather than worrying about whether you're better than the people you're training with or, trying to keep score as to who's tapping who in the gym. It's better to just understand that, keep track of how you are versus where you were yesterday. You always want to just try to be a little bit better than the person you were yesterday. That is the best competitive mindset in my mind for long-term growth and consistency in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And for, we're talking about, getting off the couch and going to training and should I go and should I not go? I've never in my career of jiu-jitsu regretted training a day. I've never finished a training session and thought, God, I wish I stayed home. Like, even on the days, like if maybe you're a white belt at the club who's new and you're getting smashed all the time, and you're getting beat down constantly. Maybe you're a higher level white belt who does a lot of the smashing, but you're also getting smashed over and over. Maybe you're a high level guy or you're a higher rank in the club, and you have those days where nothing seems to feel good, nothing's working. You're getting subbed maybe a few times even, and that is, I think people that look at those days as negative, that those are the people that have, in my opinion, it's not a healthy mindset. When I get beat in the gym, I look at that, how can I make this a positive? Well, I know that if I look at it and dissect what happened, I can learn from it and I can gain from it. So embracing really, tough training and embracing the fact that sometimes you are going to get submitted, you are going to meet guys that have your number, that's a good thing. And to be able to look at it from a healthy point of view and not as something to be avoided is a good thing. I think embracing struggle is one of the best aspects of jiu-jitsu that translates into regular life.
Yeah, it takes a bit of mental hacking, but you want to try to train yourself to be grateful for those bad days because you get a lot more out of the days where, you're on the receiving end.
It's so true.
You're going to remember and grow more from those experiences than from the days where you just go in and just run a clinic on everybody. Those days you tend not to get much out of except for maybe a bit of cardio. But the days where you're trying to survive and you're fighting off superior opponents and you're getting tapped left and right, every time I have one of those days, I try to spend some time after class just, kind of doing like a little bit of gratefulness meditation just to be thankful for the fact that I got that learning experience, because I know that those are the things that are going to stick with me and force me to improve. Whereas the days where I go in and I'm the hammer, those are the days where ultimately they're forgettable. They mean nothing in the long run.
Yeah, now that I've had a string of injuries too, I kind of see why judo classes, which are generally a little bit more formal, they almost do like a prayer at before and after class. They say za, they get down on their knees and they sort of have a meditative 30 seconds or so where they're essentially, to how I break it down, is they're almost thanking the judo gods that, we got through training together, we're safe, and it was another day of training. And I mentally do that every day now. Every day that I finish class and I'm healthy and I didn't get badly injured, that's a day to be grateful for. And even if it was, even if I get submitted a few times or whatever, you're like you said, you're always going to have your weaknesses exposed through adversity as opposed to just cleaning everyone's clock. So even in competition, a lot of the time, I love to win competitions. I've won a lot of competitions. I've lost a lot of competitions. I always learn more from my losses, and I always gain more in the long run from losses, even though it's sweet to win. But if you go to a tournament and you beat everyone and no one has anything for you, that's a great feeling. But at the end of the day, can you really take anything from that and apply it to your own game, right? I did this well, everything was working, that's great. Then the next competition, you could lose your first match, right? So just keep in mind that if you're doing a lot of competitions and you lose, there's always going to be another one. You're not defined by your losses. It's how you gain from your losses and come back that really defines you as a martial artist.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope this answers a lot of the questions that everyone has brought to our attention about longevity, and how you kind of stay in jiu-jitsu, both physically and mentally over the long run. Just to recap the mental models that we talked about today, of course, the main one here is prioritizing longevity, right? It's better to win the war than to win an individual battle. And longevity is about staying in the game for a long time. It's not about, how can I have flashes of brilliance or achieve something great in a single moment. It's about how can I integrate this into a consistent part of my life going forward. We talked about stress and recovery. So growth comes from stress and recovery, but understanding when your body and also your mind need that opportunity to recover, and giving yourself that opportunity to recover is critical to staying in the game for the long term, especially when it comes to injury prevention. We talked about the growth mindset, something that in our previous episode we also talked substantially about. This is making sure that you have a mindset of always looking for ways to improve, to use setbacks and negative experiences as an opportunity for growth, rather than dwelling on them or just thinking, well, that's it. It's not, I'm done now. Using everything that happens to you as an opportunity to elevate yourself to the next level. We talked about consistency, meaning making sure that over the long run, it is a consistency that is going to allow you to win the war. That doesn't just mean time spent on the mats, but it also means making sure that jiu-jitsu has some permanent occupying space in your mind, making sure that even when you're not training, you're keeping your mind active and coming up with ways to think about jiu-jitsu so that you never get truly rusty. We talked about the feedback loop, making sure that when you provide feedback, you provide it rapidly and in a way that is relevant to the event that happened. We also talked about establishing habits over obsessing over results. You making sure that if you want to achieve a long-term goal, you're more focused on building the solid day-to-day routines that are going to get you there versus obsessing over some hypothetical that could happen 10 years from now. We talked about keeping it playful. Probably the single most important thing if you are concerned about jiu-jitsu in the long term, it's got to be fun. Above all else, if it's not fun if it's not something that you ultimately enjoy doing, you need to find a way to make it fun if you want to stay in it for the long term. And we talked about self-competition. You are the best measuring stick for yourself. Don't obsess over people who your training partners or other people on the competitive scene are doing. The measuring stick that you want to hold yourself to is, am I better than the person I was yesterday?
Yeah, and one thing maybe we could have talked about as well is just the idea of balance, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're, most of us have jobs or careers. I had a separate career outside of jiu-jitsu. I'm very lucky that now jiu-jitsu is my career. Balance is something that's really important that will keep you in jiu-jitsu for a long time. So if you're putting in crazy hours at work and you're just never home and you never see your family and you're not eating right, you're not getting the sleep that you need, how can you have time for jiu-jitsu? So being able to set your life and organize your life in such a way that everything is, you're getting enough sleep, you're seeing your family, you're not working too much, but you're still, paying the bills, and you can exercise. Each one of those aspects to me is a currency. So understanding that if I don't get enough sleep, my whole day is going to be exhausting. If I don't have enough downtime or free time to just do what I want, to just sit on the couch and just recoup, then everything's going to be just a blur. Everything's exhausting. If I'm not eating correctly, then I'm not going to feel great. If I never see my family, I'm going to be, my wife's not going to be happy. I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to see my kids grow. In order to have an activity like jiu-jitsu stay in your life and be a part of your life, you need to be able to balance your life so that you have time for everything. You can have healthy habits. You can still be successful at work. You still see your family. Always consider that, being, and then likewise, if you're always at the school, if jiu-jitsu is your entire life and that's all you do, you're probably like a meow brother, but that might not also be the healthiest, the healthiest plan in the long run too. Maybe you're not going to have enough money to pay for your bills. Maybe you're not going to ever meet anyone and start a family if that's your goal. So knowing your goals and then balancing your life is really important for longevity. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, you need to treat time like a currency, as if it were money. And just like money, you need to budget your time. You need to have a clear understanding of how much time it's going to take to achieve your goals in jiu-jitsu or in anything. And you need to also have an honest conversation with yourself about how much time you're really willing to spend on each of these activities. And from there, then, when you do make that decision, that's when you want to maximize the value of the time that you spend. But yeah, it's something where you need to have a clear understanding of what your life priorities are and how much of your time you're willing to invest in each of them. So some related questions that I've been sitting on for a while, I thought today would be a good day to cover them because they're related to longevity. We were asked to talk about and these are kind of related, to talk about training strategies for older folks, and similarly, how to stay healthy over the long run. Now, I think we kind of talked about this in bits and bursts here and there over this episode and the last one, but training strategies for older guys is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. This is something that becomes, of course, especially important as you get older, not only because you're likely to be less resilient if you get injured, but also because you care a lot more if you get injured. When you're young, a lot of the time, you're not really too concerned about getting injured here and there, but when you're old, it becomes a much higher priority concern for you. So this is a tough question, and a lot of it, I think, is going to be context dependent on kind of who you are. When it comes to strategies for older guys, I would say that a large part of jiu-jitsu, especially as you get more experienced, is understanding that you don't need to play the other person's game. If the other person is playing a speed or power or athleticism game, you are naturally going to try to match their intensity. This is kind of, I think, part of like the fight or flight response. If the other guy is going hard, before you know it, you're probably going to be going hard too. But that's not always a good strategy. A lot of the time, the reason the other guy is going hard is because he's an athletic, strong guy and he knows that he can do it. What I like to try to do when I encounter this kind of situation, and I'm against someone who is just, they're bigger, stronger, faster, younger than me, I try to be aware of the fact that when someone is trying to smash me, my natural physical and biological reaction is going to be to try to fight back with athleticism. And that's usually a losing battle because I'm playing right into the other guy's strength. So my strategy in these cases is to try to slow it down. This is a lot easier in gi, but it is also possible in no gi quite effectively. I try to tie the guy up. I try to slow him down. I try to prevent him from moving and frustrate him and make him realize that movement and speed and strength are not going to be a valid strategy against me. And as soon as the guy realizes that and starts trying to play traditional jiu-jitsu, that's when I know I'm going to win, right?
So, I mean, number one, I'd probably, and I might get some flack for this, I might even stop doing takedowns altogether, just because the older you are, the harder you're going to fall, right? Unless you have got some really good extensive takedown experience, you probably don't want to wrestle with the young 20-year-old in the gym. So I think that getting used to just fighting off your back constantly and getting so comfortable off your back that you could pull guard anytime and be comfortable is probably a pretty valid strategy. And then working your way, when you get on top, is having an amazing sweep game. So you can always, rely on your guard. And if you rely on your guard, then you're never going to stress out when you're on your back. Another thing is I think that you could use, like you talked about tying up your opponent, Steve, using guards that are, immobilize your opponent, such as clamp-based guards, so half guards, closed guard, things like that, where you're really creating a kinetic chain between your legs, locking your opponent inside. Like I think the Coyote guard, the Lucas Leite style half guard, is one of the most effective guards because you're using really nice lever control by tweaking the leg, but also by just staying so tight and so close underneath your opponent. as a guy with a knee injury, it's been completely safe for me to adopt that style of guard. And I know guys that use it, like Jake McKenzie, who's really taken it and modified it for himself. He said that he started using it a lot because his knee was screwed up as well. So, guards that are clamp-based guards are generally pretty forgiving for older people and for people with injuries, and trying to avoid elevation or movement-based, hook-based guards and things like that, which are going to be much more dynamic and create a lot more movement. So definitely slowing down the guard, getting to your position that you like. In my case, I think half guard, one of the most effective and safest forgiving guards for someone who's older or injured.
Interesting that you kind of mentioned that hook-based guards might not be that effective as you get older. I personally really like hook-based guards, but I see your point that they do tend to be somewhat on the dynamic side, although I don't think you necessarily need to be explosive or athletic to play those effectively. I think it's more just a matter of constantly checking your opponent's movement. And however you choose to do it, though, really, the thing that you need to be aware of is when you are fighting someone who is playing a game based on athleticism, you don't want to play into that game. You don't want to try to match them move for move. You want to try to pull them into your game, which is more slowing them down, relying on technique, denying them the ability to move, and frustrating them. Because as soon as they start trying to play jiu-jitsu against you, that's when you've got the advantage.
Yeah, and of course, just refer back to the database and the website. So many great examples of things that you should do, to get the advantage if you're an older person, like create dominant angles and isolate limbs 2-on-1 and things like this are going to really pay off and be more efficient in the long run.
Yeah. And I actually agree with you on the takedown front. A lot of moves like shooting a double, these are, in addition to the fact that you do need a significant amount of athleticism to succeed there, the injury risk is also, at least I feel, pretty substantial, especially as you're dealing with size discrepancies. My game for takedowns has really been more of like standing and seated sweeps. So rather than trying to go in and impose a takedown, I'll try to do like a dynamic sweep that allows me to basically like go right from standing into a sweep and then achieve the same result as if I took them down.
Yeah, this is jiu-jitsu, people. Just pull guard. This isn't judo, okay? Just pull guard like a normal human being. For God's sake, just pull guard.
Nothing wrong with pulling guard. I mean, this is the thing, right? Pulling guard does not have to be passive. Pulling guard can be super aggressive and you can go right into an attack from there. Like if you're a good guard player, your process of like pulling guard and going to a sweep can be so fluid that it will look like a fancy takedown to anybody else, right? Whereas in reality, you're just transitioning right into a sweep.
Yeah, funny, just a side note, whenever I go to like a Naga tournament, I always, there's always like grapplers from a lot of different backgrounds, usually wrestlers. Like it's usually wrestlers and jiu-jitsu players that do Naga tournaments, and you'll always hear on the sidelines coaches be like, they shit all over the guard pullers. He just sat down, like they don't even try and wrestle. It's like, yeah, but that's how you win jiu-jitsu tournaments.
Yeah,
like,
why would you intentionally play your opponent's game? Like
exactly,
you always play the game that you're strong at and your opponent is weak at.
I always laugh.
Yeah.
Like, oh God.
All right. Well, good chat. Hope this was helpful to everyone. As always, keep the questions coming. If there's anything that you want to know about or you want us to cover in a future episode, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always looking for feedback.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.